My Adventures with Superman return this week with part 2 of Zero Day, the 3-part finale to season 1, and this episode really cracked open a lot of the mysteries the show has been teasing all season long, as Superman is now in the hands of Task Force X and the General. We learn over the course of the episode that the General, who is finally called Sam Lane even though it was pretty obvious who he was from the get-go, was part of Zero Day along with Amanda Waller, a military operation that saw their unit battling a group of extraterrestrial invaders 22 years prior. The invaders were, of course, Kryptonian, who opened a portal and were in the midst of coming through to Earth and invading them when something happened that stopped their portal and invasion, most likely Krypton exploding. This is also how Cal came to Earth in his pod, as it was shot through the portal during the invasion. It's quite a lot to take in and a pretty big departure from the standard origin. Obviously we don't know the whole story yet, but so far I quite like it. It feels like a throwback to the early 2000s comics when they would add new stuff to Superman's origins or Kryptonian heritage, like in Superman Birthright, or arcs from the Joe Kelly or Michael Turner era of Superman comics. And while most of those were hit and miss, I do applaud those and this show for actually doing something unique and different that still adheres to the character's core aspects. It also leads later on in the episode to a really interesting tie to the Lois storyline that's been developing, where she sees that it's possible Superman could turn evil, and here Superman learns that he may have been bred for war. His powers are a result of him being made into a weapon. So I like that they kind of broach it that way instead of them actually talking about it and revealing secrets to each other. Superman kind of comes to that on his own, and I thought that was quite interesting that he sees himself like that and what he could become, and I like that he's disgusted by it and doesn't want to be like that. He wants to be Superman. He wants to be the guy that helps out, that doesn't fight, that just helps. And I like that the show keeps exploring that, since that is what Superman is. The exploration into the Zero Day stuff as well gives Sam Lane a lot of backstory, expanding on his dislike for Superman and aliens, and that's really great, since usually when we first meet Sam, whether it be in the comics or in other adaptations, he's usually just generic military guy who doesn't really like aliens, but we're not really sure why, just because he's military really. And he's also more of an antagonist for Lois, since Lois doesn't like does and going up against Superman. So I like that they've kind of changed it where seemingly Lois doesn't even know he's involved, or they don't have any contact. So I'm looking forward to them diving into that possibly next season. Superman also convinces Sam that he didn't have a hand in the invasion, and that's pretty cool as well. I like that they come to the sort of conclusion that Superman couldn't possibly be the right age to be partaking in that invasion, so it's not really his fault. He was just a baby at that time. So I like the sort of moral quandary Sam goes through in trying to determine whether what he and Waller and Checkmate and Task Force X are doing and whether it is right and what they are doing, and whether Superman is really who he says he is. I do wish the rest of the villains got a little bit more play, since they just kind of all just disappear once Parasite begins growing really big. But I guess it also means that they're, out in the city and we can dive into them in season 2. They're Superman's rogues, so we can fight them every now and then. And at least we got a chance to have Livewire be the one to give Deathstroke his eye patch, which I think is pretty cool. While Superman is interrogated by Task Force X, Jimmy and Lois's storyline sees them searching high and low for Clark, recruiting the Newsboy Legion to help canvass the city. A key through line of the episode, and really the season, is the lives Superman touches with his heroics, and it comes back in a big way as everyone kind of gets together to search for Clark with Lois and Jimmy. While they also search, the Superman Revenge Squad learn that they are all going into jail and won't be let out. Waller obviously went back on her deal because of course she did, she's Amanda Waller, and they decide to break everyone out, and they break out Ivo as well, who is intent on killing Superman for ruining his life, so he grows into a giant Godzilla parasite monster, beginning to suck all of the power from the city and trying to make his way to the nuclear power plant near the city. And it's up to a severely underpowered and weak Superman to deal with him. The show here really continues to show its heart and grasp on the source material, as the big final fight really isn't much of a big final fight. All through the fight, Superman is talking about how he does not want to fight Ivo. He is sick of fighting and just wants to help the being and help him stop becoming this this monster he's becoming and this monster that's growing wildly out of control. And it all comes to a head where the big battle is really the city helping Superman thanks to Jimmy live streaming on his Flamebird account with Lois, and they're able to rally the city behind Superman and save him for a change, turning off the city's power and starving out Parasite. Superman also gets one of his final powers this episode with his X-ray vision kicking in, and it leads to a very anime final move where he blasts right through the heart of the Parasite and pulls out Ivo, who was kind of piloting the giant Godzilla Parasite like a Berserk Evangelion Titan hybrid. I'm really intrigued what the next episode will be, since this felt so much like a finale for a lot of the plot lines throughout the season. So maybe it'll be a little bit more light-hearted and fun to round out the show on kind of a high note and maybe tease some cliffhangers for the next season. Episode 9 of My Adventures with Superman really gave us a lot of answers to Superman's new origins within the show's universe, adding some interesting elements from various takes on the character's origins and early years, while also developing a really cool, totally in character final battle with the Parasite and Task Force X. I'm going to give this episode a 10 out of 10.